Today we will now a step further forward and examine the interaction of the self with the outside world. The outside world is a macro system of knowledge compared to the physical system of knowledge a man has, which is the micro system. The self gathers and builds the micro system of knowledge from the macro system. Is dependent on the macro system for the knowledge, including food is the knowledge of the body. We have seen the internal interaction of the self with the spiritual being, the nafs. The physical system originates from the micro spiritual system, which imparts guidance to it to develop into maturity. Similarly, the macro physical system, including man, stems from a macro spiritual system that contains and controls the macro physical system. That is the world of creations. This macro spiritual system is called Qadr. It can be translated as predestined. Like a desktop icon from where a full-length cinema runs with a click. Qadr acts as the container icon at a spiritual location where from characters and events emerge on the backdrop of time and space. Qadr encompasses time and space, but is not bound by time or space. Just as Qadr is the container gate to the physical world, the nafs is designed to be the container gate to the self. There is such an analogy. Accordingly, we have found 5 major states as valid. In 3 of these states, the nafs is outside of the self, or at least occasionally it is outside of the self. While in the 5th state, it is a defunct seed within. The states we once again recapitulate for understanding the external interactions thereon when the master nafs leads. This was the topic of our last session. To when the approving self walks with the nafs, that is, they are at the same level. Three, when the master self is ahead of the servant nafs. In this case, the nafs has been turned into a servant, but retracts towards it. Means even though nafs is made to accompany as a servant of the self is attached to it, and gradually it wants to shorten the distance between itself and the nafs. 4. When the master nafs leads and distances from the slave nafs, there is a master self completely neglects the slave nafs. The distance goes on increasing. 5th case is the last case. When the master self keeps in bondage the slave nafs, the slave nafs or the soul is tied down. The nafs has now become dumb, deaf and blind, with a locked heart. Sealing up its internal mercy for the self. That is the mercy of Almighty. From the heart of the nafs, the kindness, mercy or rahmah will not be allowed to be trained fully. Before it gets trained up, it will be sealed up. Now the nafs gets buried, it lies buried within the self as a dormant seed. The person gropes in the dark. He gropes in the darkness of ignorance, using tentacles of logic. We have here now 3 slides depicting models of the external interaction of the self and the nafs with the macro, physical and spiritual systems. One slide depicts the interactions in the case of the master's nafs, and the other 2 depicts the interactions in respect to the master self. The details of spiritual interaction we will, inshallah, deal with separately. Case 1. You can see the slide now. This is the case of a righteous self. It is submissive to the spiritual being and is consistently guided by Nur, divine light. The spiritual system envelops the physical system. The person receives vision, in which unseen reality is revealed or experienced. Case 2 and 3. It shows the interactions of a subordinate self that seeks guidance from the spiritual system As and when the spiritual self guides, the physical system is contained within the micro spiritual system, which gets connected to the Qadr. The individual receives nur or divine light from the macro spiritual system and knowledge from the macro physical system. Case 4 and 5. The model shows the macro interactions of the physical and the spiritual systems of an individual who does not have a submissive self. His self is not subordinate to the spiritual being or nafs. The spiritual being is detached and unconnected to the macro spiritual system. The physical system develops unguided by nur. As the spiritual system is unconnected to the Qadr. We have a fourth slide here, which shows the model in the case of an enlightened nafs. It is the blessed state of the favored. The spiritual system wraps up the macro physical system outside. The nafs envelops even the outside world and is connected to the macro spiritual system, receiving the energy that lights up, that sets ablaze the entire microsystems inside. The heart produces and emits nur. But it is the Rabb, the Almighty, who knows. The very knowledge belongs to Him, and His know is the absolute know. In the next session, inshallah, we will see how knowledge is acquired from the macro physical system of knowledge, from the macro physical system of knowledge, how man acquires knowledge, what is knowledge. We'll see in the next session.